Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, where we're going to talk about how to proactively monitor and troubleshoot Microsoft Team issues on Citrix. By ways of introduction, you have myself. I run marketing here at Goliath, and I also have Avi Lip, our technical consultant, who's really going to be giving you a demonstration of the technology today. So before we jump in, as we wait for people to join, I'd like to do just a little bit of housekeeping. So what we're going to do in terms of agenda for today is really talk about many of the challenges that we're seeing in the market when we talk to our clients supporting teams through Citrix virtualized or published desktop. We're going to talk about how you can proactively monitor those issues, as well as isolate root cause when issues do arise, leveraging use cases that we've worked with our clients on. We'll then give a demonstration for Avi on how the technology works. And then we're going to leave plenty of room for questions. So please get your questions early and often into the chat box, because at the end, we're going to go through and respond to them. We even got a few questions in advance of today's meeting. And one question we often get is, can I get a copy of this recording? Yes, within 24 hours, a copy of this recording will be in your inbox. For anyone not familiar with Goliath, I did want to take one slide, 30 seconds, to tell you about Goliath. Goliath Technologies offers monitoring and troubleshooting software for IT pros so that we can help you anticipate, troubleshoot, and document end-user experience issues regardless of where your applications, users, or workloads are located. When you would talk to any one of these clients, you see logos on the screen, they'll tell you by leveraging Goliath and our embedded intelligence and automation, it's as if they've hired 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts to the staff. The reason for that is we're going to automatically identify your entire environment. With our pre-built monitors, we're going to go ahead and alert you when any event, condition, or failure point occurs that impacts user experience. And then we're going to alert you based on those industry best practice thresholds. What I want you to take away also from this slide is that we can scale to some of the largest Citrix deployments. We also work with Horizon, but we also have an ease of use and price profile that lets us fit to small to medium-sized organizations. And the final takeaway, because I know we have some health systems on the line, is we are known as the healthcare IT standard. The reason for that is we can give you visibility across all of your EMR, EHR applications, whether they be Epic, Cerner, Meditech, Allscript, as well as your Citrix infrastructure and end user behavior. We do that because of the technical and business relationships we have with all those major EHR, EMR vendors. So with that background, let's jump in the topic of today. When the pandemic hit, we heard from a lot of IT pros that everyone started using Microsoft Teams, often through Citrix. And one of the biggest challenges is there wasn't enough bandwidth, Microsoft Teams was crashing, and so Citrix did a great thing by creating HCX optimized mode. And if you're not familiar with this mode, what it does is it ensures that there's redirection, so that if someone's using Teams on Citrix, they're utilizing the services from the native endpoint, not the virtual machine. This allows Teams calls, video, everything to run smoothly. The challenge with optimized mode, and what we heard from a lot of Citrix professionals, even the CTPs themselves, is end users will drop out of optimized mode, which means then all of a sudden calls will start to drop, they'll have intermittent issues, they won't be able to log on, and IT has zero visibility that a user has failed or fallen out of optimized mode. And so now IT is completely reactive, waiting for that user to file a ticket before they can react and improve the experience. And worse yet, trying to identify, is it an issue with Teams? Did someone really fall out of optimized mode? Is it an issue with the home environment, maybe home Wi-Fi or user behavior? Or is there some other challenge within the Citrix infrastructure that's negatively impacting Teams? And if you go to the next slide, if you're familiar with this optimized mode, what Citrix has allowed is a rather obscure message to end users. And in fact, this doesn't even populate unless an end user opens up the message. So it will tell the user if they're running in optimized mode or not, but this message is not seen by IT, so you cannot access it. And for an end user, it is highly unlikely, one, that they'll ever even open up the message so that they can file a very thorough ticket, and two, they probably don't even know it exists. And so now what IT pros are sitting back on their heels, waiting for the ticket, And then they have to go tell the user, can you open up Teams? Can you click on this alert? Let me know what it reads. It's not a great experience. And there's ways that you can proactively get ahead of this issue. It's because of this feedback and our ongoing product work where we're constantly adding embedded intelligence into the product that we just released our Microsoft Teams module. So with our embedded intelligence and automation, we are going to automatically look to see if each of your users are in optimized mode. If not, we'll alert you when they're out of optimized mode. We'll automatically restart the service so users are not even impacted. Then you can report on this so that you can see how often these issues do arise. And we can also show you documentation within the user session. I'll show you a screenshot in a minute if they ever fell out of optimized mode. We all know that users can sometimes be apathetic. They're not always submitting tickets in real time. So this way, if someone says, you know what, last week, I was having an issue with Teams. It seems to be fixed, but I just wanted to confirm that everything is working properly. I wanted to at least make you aware of the issue that I was having. You can go back and see, yes, in fact, that user had dropped out of optimized mode and it was automatically restarted because of the service at Goliath. And so with that, I kind of wanted to articulate this really using a real life example from one of our customers. So we were working with a healthcare system that's based in New Jersey. And what they were talking about was they had a huge increase in Microsoft Teams during the pandemic, really to support their telehealth. All of their scheduling team, back office team were now working remotely. And the biggest challenge was that Teams was dropping on the middle of these phone calls. In some cases, it was actually a telehealth visit with an actual patient. And IT had no visibility into the issue. So originally they were blaming it must be your home office environment. They were looking at other collaboration software saying maybe Teams is not the most effective, but we want to use it. And so what they were able to do is go ahead and deploy Goliath. And what they did find is that Microsoft Teams was falling out of this optimized mode and they had zero visibility into it. And they weren't even sure at first what it was. So they were by using Goliath, they were able to alert anytime this issue occurred and then automatically restart it. So immediately they ended a lot of these phone calls that were coming with the issue. The other thing they did is by having Goliath's full solution with that embedded intelligence and automation that really allows you to isolate root cause and prove it quickly so you can resolve the issue, they were able to identify just because the user said it's a Teams issue, was it really an issue with Teams? Was it an issue with their home Wi-Fi network? Was it an issue because of user behavior? Maybe they were using a graphically intense program while trying to use audio on Teams? Or was there actual issue with Citrix itself? And so they leveraged Goliath so that they could not only prevent issues when it came from Teams, and they had success there, but when issues did arise, they were quickly able to identify and prove root cause and resolve the issue permanently. If we go to the next slide, and we're going to show the software here in just a minute, this is the type of alert that you could get notified of. Now, this is in an email format, but what you will see that it automatically lets you know that optimized redirection service is down. And it will also tell you that you automatically restarted, so no action is needed. This content can be emailed out. It can be integrated into ServiceNow. It could be integrated into like a Slack channel, or you don't even have to share it. It can just all be accessed through the Goliath portal. So there's a lot of flexibility when I talk about alerts and exceeding thresholds. It's how do you want to consume that information and who needs visibility into it. Avi's going to walk through the software and you'll see how we break down all of the metrics that surround a user's experience. So this is just an example where not only can you see an end user's log on time, their behavior and network connection using the ICA HDX information, seeing how the actual VDI machines, the hypervisor host, what applications they're running, so that internal infrastructure and how it impacts user experience. We can also show you every alert that came up during that user session. So in this case, if the user, Ted Rainey, called in and complained of a Teams issue, you could quickly identify his session, go into the alerts tab, and see that in fact, that redirection service was down, it was automatically restarted, and it should be no issue moving forward. So this is the level of visibility that we can give you so that you can be proactively notified, or you can have it in context of that user session should that user ever call and complain around Teams. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Avi. And what Avi's really going to talk about is how you can use Goliath to troubleshoot and prove root cause if someone's calling in an issue and it is to do with Teams. This happens all the time. Or maybe it's not Teams, maybe it's another application that you're having issues with. We have a customer we work with, Penn National Insurance, and they were kicking off their new virtual workspace initiative. And while it wasn't a Teams issue, their challenge was Cisco soft phones were constantly dropping. So they had Citrix that they just upgraded. They put iGel in as their thin client, and they were trying to deploy Cisco soft phones. And users were calling in saying, this just isn't working because our calls are always dropping. So leveraging Goliath, they were actually able to prove that it had nothing to do with Citrix, nothing to do with iGel, nothing to do with Cisco soft phones, and everything to do with that end user's home Wi-Fi network and needing to upgrade their ISP. So with that, Avi, do you want to go in and dive into the software and show how we can really isolate root cause, whether it is the connection, the application, the back-end infrastructure, and really at the end of the day, stop a lot of that finger pointing that happens around the issue manifests itself to the end user as a Citrix is slow or Teams is crashing, but the root cause could be any number of things.
Absolutely. And Stacey, to your point, exactly. So when end users are experiencing issues, for everyone in IT who's on the line right now, typically you're getting feedback such as, Citrix is slow or my Teams application stopped working. You're not going to get the caller calling in saying, hey, it was because my Teams call went not into the optimized mode, and that's why I was having the poor performance combined with poor network connection. You're just not going to get that type of feedback. So where people do use our technology is when you're looking for that objective evidence as to what is causing poor performance. So where I just went to within the technology is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. And this screen populates with all of the Citrix sessions in your environment, both your active and your historical sessions. We don't average or roll up any of our data, so you're going to get the same level of granular detail for a session that took place 2 weeks ago, a month ago, as you would for an active session. So if a user is saying that they've been having performance issues for the past 3 weeks, you can very easily just search for that particular user. The screen will dynamically filter for any text that's on the screen. So now I'm looking for just that particular user sessions from the past few weeks. Then, when you're ready to investigate as to what could be causing the poor performance, you just click on the user, and what will populate is a screen that has all the high-level key data points that went into this user's Citrix session. At the top, you'll notice that you have information such as the client endpoint machine, the client IP address, the receiver version that's on the endpoint. You have a mini topology view here that is going to show you all of the components that contributed to this user's Citrix session in a single view. So you're able to see the client endpoint machine, how that user connected into the environment. Was this an internal connection? Was it an external connection? The delivery controller brokered the session, AD, the session host, and then the hypervisor host. You have a high-level log-on summary breakdown here. Then you have key performance metrics to give you quick insight into what could be causing in-session performance issues. Now, it's great to have all this rolled up onto one screen. Oftentimes L1 or help desk, they don't even need to leave this screen here to be able to quickly pinpoint root cause. But if you notice across the top, there's a series of dedicated tabs for log-on duration issues, diving into the ICA and HDX channel. Then you move into the data center where you have the session host resources for the time frame of that user session. The hypervisor host metrics for the duration of that user's particular Citrix session. The processes, as well as the alerts and the event logs. So say in the case that we were talking earlier, as far as Teams is causing issues, you get a notification that a particular user is having issues with Teams, fell out of optimized mode. This is where that screenshot would be displayed as far as the specific alert showing that that user fell out of optimized mode. If it's in a VDI session, have it automatically restarted. But it gives you that ability to quickly come here to the alerts, see which alerts triggered during the time frame of just this user's session so that you can see, oh, you know what? Chad was having, he did have a Microsoft Teams issue last Tuesday, and we see that documented right here. Now, to Stacy's point, there are so many variables that go into delivering a satisfactory user experience. I mean, we're talking, Citrix, Windows, VMware, the different types of applications that you're using. It's hard to be able to pinpoint exactly what the root cause of these issues are when you just receive a Citrix is slow complaint. But that's where our technology comes into play, and why people reach out to us is to be able to get that type of insight. So let's walk through a typical troubleshooting exercise where an end user is calling in saying that Citrix is slow. You can find this, you can determine this from a number of different screens within the technology. Where I'll show it from is the ICA and HDX tab, where some of this information is going to look familiar to you. You have round trip time, network latency, ICA latency. And what I'm looking for here first is to understand, was this user actually having performance issues? And first place that I'll take a look at is round trip time. I'm sure we're all aware on the line of what round trip time is, but as far as, it's the amount of time for when a user does an action, for it to traverse the network, be processed on the session host, and displayed back at the client endpoint. So what I'm looking at here is the round trip time for the duration of this particular user session, and we can see that this took place on April 6th, and it's timestamped down to the second. And what I'm looking for is any time that round trip time is above this threshold of 350 to 450 milliseconds, represented by the orange and red line. Anytime that round trip time is above that threshold, I then know that that user is having performance issues, because at those points, that's when latency is apparent to the end user. I can see not only is it above those thresholds, but it's way above it. We reach round trip time that was 1300 milliseconds, so that user's definitely having performance issues. And now we want to understand, was it more of a network related issue, or was it a resource utilization issue? Typically boils down to one of those two areas. And from here, by including network latency, I can see that there is a direct correlation that when round trip time was increasing, network latency was also increasing. So at the initial look, it looks like network is driving the poor performance here. And you can see this right on the summary screen as well. So you can see round trip time spiking. At the same time, network latency is spiking. If it was a resource utilization issue, you'd be able to see it right here on the same tab as well. But at this point, we can now see that network latency is what's driving round trip time. And this network latency metric, something that's very important about this is that this is real-time network latency from the ICA protocol itself. This is not an ICMP or ping-based test, but it's an accurate representation of how much the network overall, from the client endpoint all the way to the data center, is impacting round trip time. So we've now realized it's a network issue that's driving the high round trip time. But we want to understand, was it something at that client endpoint that was impacted? Was it the Wi-Fi connection if that user's working remotely? And what I can see here, this connection speed metric, this is the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver or the workspace app wherever that user is working from. So whether they're working from their home office, whether they're a clinician at a hospital site, or if they're a user working from a Starbucks connected via a mobile hotspot. The amount of bandwidth that is available for Citrix. And what I can see here is that when this user did start having the issues at the end of the session, there was a huge drop in connection speed from 53 megabits per second all the way down to 2.7. And we have those same threshold marks so that you can quickly be able to pinpoint, okay, is it below that threshold? Is it above? And for connection speed, you're at a bare minimum, you're going to want at least 10 megabits per second to support a satisfactory Citrix session. Anything less than that, that will 99 out of 100 times be the driver of poor performance. And what I can see here is that the connection speed, not only was there a huge drop, but it dropped well below the critical threshold. So I now know that not only is this user having the performance issues, it's being driven by the network, but it's specifically being driven by a drop in connection speed and lack of bandwidth available at that end user's location. So as far as L1 or help desk, that's a quick find just by looking at these two charts, or right here on the summary page. It's these three graphs right here, where you can quickly see user is having an issue, it's caused by the network, and specifically this huge drop in connection speed. You can talk to the end user as far as plugging directly into the router. Maybe some kids were streaming Xbox or Netflix at the house and you need to kick them off, but it gives you that objective evidence to pinpoint, was it a Wi-Fi issue at that end user's location that was the bottleneck? And say if it wasn't a network related issue, again, you have resource utilization right here from the VM perspective, all timestamped down to the second. So CPU, memory, or was it more of a hypervisor host issue? Was CPU memory impacting a large number of users by chance? And with these different tabs, you can just click right into get detailed metrics on the session host. So CPU, memory, disk latency, storage issues. Have that same level of granular detail for the hypervisor host, where you're able to see the host CPU, memory, storage. You're able to see all the data stores that are attached to that hypervisor host, as well as at the bottom, you're able to see all the VMs that are being supported by that host at the time frame of just this particular user session. So say if CPUs, you couldn't find anything wrong with that user's network or with their particular VM, but you come to the hypervisor host tab and you see that there's 5 or 6 VMs that were all being supported by that same host that were running hot on CPU and memory. You have a noisy neighbor, if you will, that's impacting performance for everyone else. So you get, from here, you're able to see, do you need to potentially add more memory to the VM? Is this a consistent issue and they're always running low on memory? Add more. Do you need to add more CPU? And since we're keeping all this information historically, you can look at trends and understand, okay, for this particular machine, it's always at 95% memory being utilized. We need to add more. Now, we've talked about from a network perspective, a resource utilization issue. Something else that's typically a blind spot is end user behavior. And what we actually do here, this bottom left-hand chart, you're able to see the ICA channel usage breakdown, where you can get insight into what the end user was doing within their session. And this plays a hand in, Teams calls, if you're a doctor or clinician dragging dictation, if you're a user who's watching a video within their session. Why that all plays a role is because depending on what an end user is doing within their session, that can absolutely impact performance. If you're watching a graphically intensive video, say if you're watching a YouTube clip or you're watching a sporting event, that is harder to process, and can be impact, round trip time and whatnot. So with these different ICA channels, we're going to break them all out. You're able to see end user experience metrics such as audio bandwidth, inbound and outbound. This is from the server perspective. So that say if you are on a Teams call and it's not in optimized mode, audio bandwidth in, was that user talking into their session? Audio bandwidth out, was that audio coming back from the session host back to the end user, so that you can understand if they're not in optimized mode, how that type of bandwidth is being utilized. Not to mention if it's a video call on Teams, you're going to have the thin wire bandwidth that's being heavily utilized. This is the Citrix display adapter. So then you're going to see the thin wire bandwidth being escalated during the session because you're having a video conference call, you're having these graphics that are being processed. And based off the type of bandwidth that's being utilized, you can then get insight into end user behavior. So if round trip time spikes, you also have that the thin wire bandwidth and the audio bandwidth are being utilized, and you receive a notification that Teams fell out of optimized mode, clear cut, that's what your issue is. So it's by having this level of detail that allows you to pinpoint root causes. It cuts down the troubleshooting process from sometimes hours to clicks. Now, sometimes you don't even need to spend those few clicks on troubleshooting, because with the embedded intelligence and automation within Goliath, we can automatically restart our particular process. So here you have all the processes running on the session host. Say if there's a particular process that's running hot, high on CPU, here's a WMI process. But say, for example, if it was Teams, Teams, you may not want to restart a process just because the user could be, in the middle of something important. But say if it was like an Outlook, process that's running, you can automatically have the technology restart a particular process, restart a particular service that would be impacting performance. So it's something that the technology can get ahead of those issues before end users are actually impacted. And with that, Stacy, I am going to pass it back to you unless there is anything else that we want to cover on this quick demonstration.
No, nothing else I had to cover on the demonstration, but if you do have questions, please submit them in the Q&A box because we'll be happy to respond to them here at the end. And we do have a few that came in, but let's wrap up, Avi, and then we'll go back.
Sounds great. So I will toss it back to you at this point.
So the other question that we often get, and it's probably interesting, you see this in your own environment quite a bit, is when users start to get noisy about an issue, Teams has calls dropping, the right manager had a Teams issue on a big client call, then you start getting broader questions around, so what is that end user experience? How their remote worker experience look like? Are people having good enough performance to be productive? And so we offer a number of reports, but I did want to highlight here that we have what we call our end user experience scorecard. And what this scorecard does is it benchmarks your performance for all users, and you can definitely filter to be remote workers or workers that are back in the office, certain times, certain delivery groups. But the goal here is to benchmark that against industry standards. So you saw in the demonstration, we're already offering you degradation lines to show if performance is above or against thresholds. Now we're doing this in a very simplistic report that you can easily share with your manager, maybe upper management, when they ask, what's the end user experience look like? And one of the advantages of our reports, we know there's lots of analytics out there. As Avi said, we don't roll up our data. So if you would see something in here like red, such as network latency, so maybe people are really complaining about Teams, but you can go ahead and see those same users at the very bottom there, Cameron Ross, has been complaining about Teams issues, but he has an average network latency that's bringing down the entire score for everybody. And so you can see that an outlier won't totally defy what your score is because it is an average, but you can see there are some people that are having okay performance, right, which will give you an overall decent score, but you certainly have users that are negatively impacted. So anytime you see yellow or red, you can drill down and see those individual user scores so that you can go and address the issue. The other question I kind of wanted to proactively respond to, if we go to the next screen, is, well, how hard is this to get up and running? If you are having issues with Teams, one of the value of Goliath is you can get up and running within less than 2 hours. That's because of the embedded intelligence and automation we offer. So we're going to auto-discover your entire environment. We're going to automatically deploy. Using that embedded intelligence and automation, we're already going to identify every condition, failure point, and element that could impact user experience, such as Teams, and alert you when those thresholds are exceeded. So once you start deploying, you're immediately setting up those alerts, the data is being collected for reporting, and everything you saw from a troubleshooting exercise that Avi went through is available to you. That's why our clients do tell us that when they use Goliath, it's as if they've added a full-time troubleshooting expert that's available 24/7 by 365 days a week. So with that, I want to turn it over to some questions that we've gotten, Avi, from the audience. And please do keep them coming. We had a few come in ahead of the webinar, but we've also had some come throughout. So the first question comes from Ravi. How quickly do I receive an alert if something is wrong, and how can I get that alert? So the answer, Ravi, is you get that almost instantaneously in real time. So you're automatically going to get that alert as soon as the software sees it. So as close to real time as possible. The other terms in terms of how you get the alert, I referenced you can get it in email. It could be integrated into ServiceNow or other ticketing systems, integrated into Slack, or you can just see it in the Goliath display. So all of this is configurable to how you want to get that alert. So when we talk about that 2 hours to set up, this is, for example, one of the questions that I know Avi runs through the deployment cycle of how do you want some of these alerts to occur. The next one comes from Trey. Do we need to run scripts to set up monitors? The answer is no. All of this is pre-built with the intelligence into the product. But if you do have scripts that you want to go ahead and run, maybe for a remediation action, for example, you can do that in the software. And so we have an extensible program where we have hundreds of monitors built in, but we also can allow you to put in your own monitor roles based on any syslog, SNMP traps, or Win services so that you can automatically set those things up to run. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. We don't require scripting, but definitely can allow you to import your scripts if you have some set up. In fact, I think, Avi, we were working with a client not too long ago. They were using a script because they were running out of memory and they wanted to clear the cache. And so they quickly ran a script. Anytime that alert was exceeded, they would go ahead and clear the cache to ensure that there was no impact to users. So definitely has that ability.
Sure does.
Next one is Lindsay. Do you support alerts for other tools like WebEx, Zoom? So the answer is yes, right? Again, anything that gives off a Windows service, a SNMP trap, a syslog, anything that we can collect that data for, we can go ahead and set up an alert for. So what we hear most often is Teams. So that's why we have the Microsoft Teams module. But if you're using other collaboration software or Cisco soft phones, anything like that, we can go and proactively capture any of those messages and go ahead and set those alerts. And if it is a service, restart the service. Next one comes from John. I have a need to check the health of my environment, and today I have to check individual VMs, our NetScaler, to see if they're working. Do you have a view that shows me my overall health? So this is something we do have and didn't show. Avi, do you have access to the automatic discovery map?
I do.
All right.
Pull it up.
So John, we do have that ability. When I say we automatically discover your environment, this is a visual depiction of what I mean by that so that we can see all those individual components and give you a visual aid of, are they working or not? Avi, you want to walk through this?
Yeah, sure. So upon deployment, we are automatically discovering the components that contribute to Citrix, map them out, show the correlations between these different components. And then we're automatically, as mentioned, adding hundreds of modern rules to the environment that are looking for events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds. And what's important about those monitoring rules is they drive this view as a heat map structure. So as issues start to arise on individual components, they'll turn from green to red or orange, depending on the severity level of that alert. So say if you have a broker service error that's taking place on this particular delivery controller, this will turn red. Doesn't mean the machine's down, just means that there's an alert that has been deemed critical as triggered on that particular DDC. And as you click on that respective component, on the right-hand side, you're going to see resource utilization, context-specific health checks, as well as any of the alerts that are firing off based off of that embedded intelligence and automation, the technology. And to just have a little bit of page geography so that we know what we're looking at here. At the top left, you have the ability to toggle between multiple different Citrix sites. So whether it's an active passive setup, if you have multiple farms, or especially if you're a service provider and you're managing multiple different environments remotely, to be able to have the overall health in for each of those different environments within just a couple clicks, our service provider clients tell us is incredibly valuable. Now, that pretty much answers the question as far as, do we have something that can show the overall health of the environment? But we have a different, number of different views that you have capabilities here. We're looking at the infrastructure view here first, where you can see, any of the NetScalers to that question, the storefront servers, delivery controllers, and any other supporting servers in the environment. Then you have the ability to drill down further, where you're going to see the delivery controllers mapped out to the delivery groups, to the machine catalogs, and then the gold images if available. The right-hand side, you're going to have information such as registered machines, unregistered machines, sessions, disconnected sessions per delivery group. And then you can drill all the way down into the machine layer, which is going to show you all the way down to the hypervisor cluster and individual hypervisor hosts, so that you can see the overall health, whether it's from each respective type of machines, type of hosts, correlate average end user experience metrics, so you can understand, do we have a macro issue? And just within a couple clicks, you can see the overall health. And something that's amazing about this is that this will automatically update based off of any changes that you make in the environment. So once it's up and running, very little legwork has to be done on your end because the technology has that embedded intelligence and automation to automatically discover those different components. You can even find misconfigurations in the environment because of this view.
Next one was from Tracy. They're using Citrix Cloud. Do you support Citrix Cloud? So the answer to that is yes. And actually, we have our Citrix Cloud connector module. So we really have an industry first where we're not only monitoring the health of Citrix Cloud and alerting you if there's a performance issue, but we're also looking at all the individual connectors. So if a service within that connector goes down, we can alert you and automatically restart it. Very similar to what we just talked about with Microsoft Teams. So if you're on Citrix Cloud or looking to move to Citrix Cloud, we absolutely have support for that. We have from Sid, our remote users complain of slow logons. What kind of logon data do you provide? Oh, we've got a lot of logon data. We've collected over 33 stages of the logon process. So Avi, do you want to bring back the demo? And as he does bring that up, we hear this a lot. In fact, we were working with a client, their children's hospital. They were initiating a new project where they had to get their initial connects down to 30 seconds and reconnects down to 10 seconds. So one, we helped them troubleshoot exactly where those issues were so they could address them. And secondly, we also reported upon that to make sure that they were meeting their SLAs. So everything that Avi's showing you from a logon perspective, we also can report on that data historically as well so that you can trend it over time. So Avi, you want to drill into the logon time?
Yeah, absolutely. So say you get an alert or notification about a long logon time or your users are complaining about that. You have the logon duration right from the summary screen here. You can always sort that to find the highest logon times in the environment, but typically you're coming here because you receive an alert or a complaint. And once you click into that user session, you have this dedicated logon duration tab where, as Stacy mentioned, we're going to give you over 30 different stages. For other tools, you'll get 6 or 8. But here you can see information such as, how long did that logon actually take? Then you're going to drill down into the brokering stages. And the page is broken down in 2 different sections pretty much. You have the brokering stages at the top, where you're going to be able to see each of these different stages. So, at the delivery controller to start, at drive mapping, profile load, logon script execution, each with the duration of each stage and a Gantt chart to quickly be able to draw your attention to where was the main contributing factor to a long logon. At the top right, you're able to see what's happening at Citrix Receiver. And remember, this is without deploying any technology to the endpoint machines themselves. But you're able to see ICA file download, session creation. Then at the bottom, you're able to see the logon stage details from the session host. So client server validation, authentication, you can drill down into that and see which OUs that user was a part of, the domain controller that authenticated the user. And then for group policies, we're going to show you each group policy down to the policy name and how long each one took to execute. Now, this is in our lab environment. I do have a screenshot that I think drives home the value of this a little bit more and how our clients do use this information, because as you all on the line know, that there could be a particular group policy that was misconfigured that was adding to the logon time. The domain controller from a different physical data center was the one authenticating the user. So there's so many different components, but let's just run through a quick scenario of how our clients use this portion of the technology to cut down on logon time significantly. So you see that there's a long logon time. Immediately recognize that profile load was consuming the majority of that time. Drill down, you see that it's group policies that are adding the majority of the time. And then specifically in this case, a VDI drive mapping policy that was incorrectly mapped added 180 seconds to a logon time that was completely unnecessary. You immediately see that, can resolve the issue. And we've had clients that have been able to cut down on logon times by over 80%. So hopefully that answers the question as far as what stages and information we provide on the logon, but also how you use this information to actually reduce your logons.
Thank you, Avi. And we've definitely had clients tell us that they've reduced the amount of tickets coming for logons by 40–50% by not only finding out where root cause is, but by putting permanent fix solutions in place. John came back and he wanted to know, Avi, have we ever proven that root cause is related to compatibility issues with receiver?
Yeah, I mean, we're pulling in the receiver version in for each session. So plenty of times you've been able, we've had clients that have been able to find out, oh, wait, hold on. We see that there's a direct correlation with these users that are all on receiver version 14, that those are the users who are having these issues. We need them all to be able to upgrade that. And there's a couple different views. I can real quickly, Stacy, if we have a moment, show you a
Sure.
high level overview that can show what percentage of the overall environment is actually on a specific receiver version. So if you take a look at, we're back over here at the automatic discover and dependency map, the bottom right, you can see what receiver versions are out in the field and quickly be able to see, oh, wow. So we have half the environment that's still on receiver version 14, need them to upgrade. And since that information is displayed in each individual user session, it's very easy to correlate, okay, the users that are having performance issues, it's because of a compatibility with receiver version 14.
Great. Thanks, Avi.
Mm-hmm.
We have someone here from Mark. We have some nagging end user troubleshooting issues, not only around Teams, but other applications, such as print and others. Do you offer any troubleshooting services? So the answer is yes. We obviously are focused around the software, but we have years of expertise. That's how we built the embedded intelligence and automation. And so if you do have very focused projects where you're looking for an outside expert to come in and help troubleshoot, we do offer specific consulting services as well. We have one from Natalie. Have you ever proven that it was home Wi-Fi that was impacting performance of an end user session? So yes, Natalie, I don't know, Avi, if you want to bring up the network connection. When Avi was talking about those screens that show the ICA and HDX tab, and we show the lines of where degradation is, that 100% is actually showing you in less than 3 clicks that you can prove home Wi-Fi is an issue. So you can see that they have slow latency or high round trip times. And then by clicking here, you can see that network speed dropped. And that's going to indicate not only that it's home Wi-Fi, but as Avi pointed out, that specific connection speed to that Citrix environment. And so I think one of the things we often hear from users is YouTube works fine. I can watch Netflix. Why can't I do my applications through Citrix? Citrix does require a certain level of bandwidth. And so if you don't have a high enough speed to support the applications, that's what you're going to see here. It's not just what they get from a ping test, as Avi pointed out. It's actually allocated towards Citrix. Anything you want to add there, Avi?
Yeah, it's in today's working landscape, you have so many people working remotely, and something that I'm sure everyone on the line has encountered is where if you ask the end user, it's, well, how's your connection speed at your location? They'll say that can't be the issue. My ISP says I have the most amount of bandwidth possible. It couldn't be my internet connection. And then when you have this data to be able to then back up your assumption that it was their Wi-Fi, where you can see, oh, you know what? I do see that you had plenty of bandwidth available when you weren't having any issues. You did have 53 megabits per second, so your ISP, that information is correct. But when you were having the issues, there was a huge drop in that connection speed. Since it's timestamped down to the second, remember, this is what's available just for Citrix, not the total ISP bandwidth that's available. And since it's timestamped, you can ask to the user, hey, well, what happened at 8:43? We see there was a huge drop in connection speed at that time. And that's when the user will be like, oh, you know what? I went to work on the rooftop deck and the router's down in my basement. Or the kids, that's when they started streaming Xbox or Netflix and restricted the bandwidth that was available solely for Citrix. So that's just what I was going to bring up, is that now you actually have that objective evidence to have that data-driven type of a conversation with the end user.
It's always fun. I literally was just talking to a client last week, and dare I say, was actually happy. And I was like, you're one of the happiest Citrix IT pros I've talked to in a little while. And he said, well, I wasn't happy 3-4 months ago because I was really blind to showing root cause of these issues. But now that I can have an intelligent conversation, whether it be with an end user, the network team, the storage team, he's like, not only am I being more productive because I can really help resolve the issue much more quickly, he's like, I'm actually looking proactively at who are my users with poor latency and proactively reaching out to them based on the reports, he's like, I feel like my job has totally transformed where now I'm being highly proactive versus just sitting back and being responsive. And I thought that was a really cool comment to hear an end user talk about, because that's really our goal. That's the passion that we all have here at Goliath to help you do. Landon asks, for your end user experience scorecard, how hard is it to set up? Not hard at all, right? It's all about getting the software deployed in that under 2 hours to start collecting the data. And then literally there's a template that we can give you to go get that set up, and you're off to the races. So in fact, I think when we launched it that week, we had 10 or 15 customers immediately jump on it and start using it because they already had the software deployed. So it is not hard at all. Avi, you've been part of some of those calls. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's very easy to be able to get that information. I mean, the install process is simple, and then once that's done, it's just, you know, quickly dropping your data into that particular report, then you have it.
Blake asks, we get asked for various reports from our security team around user activity. Do you have any customers that use your reports to provide information back to security? Blake, it's interesting you asked this. Avi and I were doing a local CUGC event just a few weeks ago, and this came up, and I asked, how many other people get questions from the security team? And someone piped up and said, well, I bet the room's split 50-50. 50 of us are asked, 50% are asked all the time. The other 50%, their security team has no idea that we as Citrix pros have as much access to user data as we do. So I think the answer is yes, people definitely get asked, and we do support them. Avi, do you have the productivity report you could bring up? So in terms of our reporting, we can absolutely talk about who's using Citrix, when they're using Citrix, if they're using XenApp, what applications. So this is an example where we do call it our productivity report, but we have clients using this for security reasons. A couple things is, one, it's telling you exactly when a user logged in and what applications they were using. So if you wanted to go ahead and look for anomalies, let's say all of a sudden a user started logging in at 3 a.m. or a user started running PowerShell scripts, that really could be suspicious behavior. The other thing that people have been asked for is Bob's system got hacked. I need to know everything Bob logged into over the last 30 days to see what they could have had access to. So again, you can easily pull that data from our report. We also have a healthcare client. So in this productivity report, we are tracking how long a user session is, how active they're in their user session. We also have an inactivity max. So one of our healthcare clients has a compliance policy that if someone's inactive for 45 minutes within their Citrix session, they're automatically logged out. You can imagine in healthcare, you have a lot of people logging in, logging out of their systems. And so they have that policy put in place. They run this report to confirm that the Citrix policy is actually being effective, and nobody shows up with having inactivity max of over 45 minutes. So the long-winded answer is yes, we do have quite a bit of data, and we do have many of our clients that are using that data to report back to the security or compliance team. Rick asks, how long is your trial for? So you might have seen the tech info at goliathtechnologies.com. We do run our trials by default for 30 days. If you need more time, we can absolutely talk to you about that. But you can email techinfo at goliathtechnologies.com or go to our website, and we're happy to give you access to that software for 30 days. Follow-up is, how do you price? So we price based on IT element that you're monitoring. So really looking at those elements. We have a question here from Micah. Do you offer managed services that would help us not only troubleshoot issues, but manage our entire Citrix infrastructure? So yes, if you're potentially looking to outsource the hosting of Citrix, the management, the troubleshooting, the monitoring, the help desk, or any level of degrees, we offer those managed services. Also, if you're looking to deploy Goliath, maybe as monitoring as a service, as a more kind of SaaS-based solution, absolutely can do that as well. So again, really, we have a mix of both services as well as software that can support you. This comes from Shelly. Do you average or roll up the data that is collected over time? No, there's no roll up or average. Really, the only restriction on how long you keep the data is your own infrastructure. So obviously, there's a little bit of cost when you're collecting data into the database, but a lot of our clients keep their data for well over a year so they can drill back and also do some of that trend analysis. Avi, I have one for you that definitely comes up often. This comes from Natasha. How are you different from Citrix Director and Citrix Analytics? I think we even have a slide maybe you can talk to.
We do have a slide. Let me pull that up. So with Citrix Director or Citrix Analytics, they're gonna either or is gonna give you either good oversight of the environment, the overall health of it. Citrix Director, you're gonna be able to see, certain things that could be causing issues with just Citrix. But by default, those different tools are really designed to just let you know that Citrix is working as it should be. But we all know that there's so many different components that impact user experience beyond just Citrix. So with this slide, well, you can see anything that's not red, you're going to be able to get insight into with Director or Analytics. And that's whether it's an overall score of the health, just being able to drill down into certain sessions. But if you're looking for the overall end user experience, our clients tell us by having everything that's on the screen, everything that's including what's red, is very important. And that's what you get with Goliath. So whether you're talking about the endpoint devices from different remote connections to understand how that connectivity at those locations is impacting performance. If you're in healthcare, your specific EHR modules, so whether it's Cerner, Epic, Allscripts, Meditech, to be able to understand the performance of the back end of the applications, the hypervisor layers, the back end system, so whether it's Active Directory, SQL, and then the specific user devices and the peripherals, to be able to have all that in a single console and have that information historically is really a huge difference between us and some of the Citrix Analytics or Director.
Avi, I think we have one last question from Nicholas. So if you have a question that we haven't answered, and I love the engagement, something that always makes it more enjoyable, please do submit. This is Nicholas. You mentioned EHR modules. We are a health system that uses Epic. What metrics do you collect? So we collect a number of different metrics from Epic, and a big advantage of that is you can see those metrics both in the screen as well as the Citrix information. So what we hear often is a Citrix IT Pro. Look at Avi, he's always on the ball. From a Citrix IT Pro is that they don't always have performance metrics from Epic. So when a user calls in, they might say, Citrix is slow, Epic is slow using Citrix, the ticket gets routed to you, and you have no idea, is Epic really being slow? Is it really because of Citrix? Is it user behavior, as Avi has shown with network or maybe running audio? So we pull all of this together. Avi, you want to highlight some of the metrics that we're pulling from Epic Hyperspace?
Yeah, so we're pulling this information right from System Pulse. And so you can see, the total counts, the average grefs, the block reads, DB and web requests. And then there's this workflow latency dashboard where you're able to see the average workflow time, DB, web network time, client CPU time, so that where this, as Stacy was mentioning, it is in a single console. You're able to get the full end-to-end visibility from the end user experience, how the delivery infrastructure is playing a role, as well as the back-end performance of your Epic application, so that you can quickly be able to narrow down what the issue is, whether, regardless of where it is in the environment. And as Stacy mentioned, some of this information may look familiar if you guys have access to System Pulse, but the thing is that not everybody does. Sometimes you'll have siloed departments where it's just the Epic team that has access to this, and the Citrix team where you're really working on the delivery of these applications. To have this type of insight, we've been told, is incredibly valuable. And we're the only technology of our kind that has purpose-built modules for all of the major EHR applications.
And not only for that, for example, at Cerner, where most of the application is hosted, we're the only vendor like ours where we actually have the ability to put agents in the Cerner hosted infrastructure, which is Citrix based, so that we can pull this data out and actually give visibility. So if you are a health system and are looking for not only teams, but having visibility into those EHR performance and really troubleshoot those issues, definitely take a look at the software. We actually have another webinar focused on healthcare with CTP George Spears on Thursday. So feel free to go ahead and register for that one. We'll be talking a lot different topics, all healthcare centric. So with that, Avi, I think we answered them all. Whew, good set of questions there. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining. If you are interested in a custom demo, we hit on a lot of topics beyond Teams. If you're interested in a free trial, if you have questions, do email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. We're happy to follow up with you.